Welcome back to State and Local Government and Politics. In Part 12 of Module 8 on the courts, we'll discuss state and local courts and sustainability and the conclusion. The judicial branch may not hold the sword as does the executive branch, nor command the purse as does the legislative branch, but contrary to Alexander Hamilton's view, it does have great influence over American society. In many areas of American life, the courts have fostered needed change when the political branches could not do so. In the areas of freedom of speech, racial equality, business regulation, the rights of the accused, and environmental protection, the victories made along the way were often seen not in legislation but rather in the American courts. State and local courts may be somewhat reluctant participants in the public policy process, but they do have an important role as policymakers nonetheless. Judges are called upon to exercise judicial review of both the legislative and executive branches, interpret laws and constitutions, and make judicial policy. While unified state courts ensure a high level of consistency in the operation of courts, the decentralized operations of local courts make it possible for judges to become key actors in local political life by dealing with litigation reflecting local social, economic, environmental, and political conflicts in impartial and constructive ways. Cases heard in local trial courts can have an important impact on sustainable development throughout the nation. One of the most recent such cases is that of Kelo versus the City of New London, Connecticut. The case in question concerned Fifth Amendment rights set forth in the U.S. Constitution. The controversial issue arose when the City of New London chose to use its power of eminent domain to condemn some private homes so that the property on which they sat could be used as part of the city's economic development plan, a plan that would result in this private property being condemned for use by another private party working in concert with the City of New London. Eminent domain is the principle by which the government can appropriate private property. The homeowners of the property in question filed a lawsuit in which they challenged the right of the City of New London to exercise its power of eminent domain for this purpose, and their case moved all the way from the Connecticut Trial and Appellate Courts to the U.S. Supreme Court. In reaction to this decision, many state legislatures viewed this U.S. Supreme Court's decision as too greatly benefiting large corporations at the expense of families and neighborhood communities. As a result, legislation was introduced in several states and ballot measures were placed on the ballot in other states aimed at amending state constitutions to provide greater protection of private property rights from this type of use, that is, economic development, of the municipal power of eminent domain. That power is typically employed when there is some pressing need for public ownership of some private land to serve clear public purposes, for example, creating a roadway for traffic control. The Kelo case has caused the strengthening of private property rights in many states because this is a politically popular and apparently cost-free action for elected officials to take. However, by strengthening private property rights, states enacting greater protections to homeowners may make it more difficult to promote sustainable development. There are two clear areas within the purview of state and local courts that can impact sustainability in a major way, and those would be judicial federalism and the maintenance of judicial impartiality. Judicial federalism is a legal term referenced earlier which characterizes situations in which state courts give priority to a state question addressed in state constitutional law over a federal question addressed in federal constitutional law. In the recent past, judicial federalism has focused on enhancing the civil rights of a state's vulnerable minorities, for example, racial and ethnic minorities and the criminally accused, beyond the rights provided in the U.S. Constitution. Today, in the context of the need to address global climate change and actively pursue sustainability, judicial federalism could expand its purview to include the protection of other vulnerable environmental minority interests, such as wildlife, water resources, ecosystem services, and rural communities. The maintenance of judicial impartiality requires that judges and their courts be independent of outside influences, making decisions based on legal principles and fairness and equity, as opposed to the provision of special consideration based on political party or privileged interest. The recent trends towards politicization of the courts and judicial selection process brought on in the wake of the White decision opens the door to the possibility that private interests that benefit from unsustainable practices, such as urban sprawl, sole reliance upon automobile travel for transportation, overharvesting of forests, and excessive extraction of natural resources, will seek to plant judges friendly to their interests on state trial and appellate court benches. Efforts are needed by those who support the goals of sustainability to promote both the independence of their state and local courts and to stem the rising tide of the politicization of courts and the judiciary. That ends Module 8 on the courts. In Module 9, we'll discuss state and local bureaucracy and administration.